Greetings everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. Avowed is likely right around the corner, and I know many of you will want to refresh yourself on the amazing Pillars of Eternity series. Developer Obsidian Entertainment has referenced Deadfire multiple times in their marketing for Avowed, and it seems like there will be some degree of crossover between the two games. Unfortunately, Deadfire can be a very complex game with a ton of mechanics for players to weed through in order to play it. Hopefully, my new player guide will help all of you make sense of this incredible experience and have a great time in the world of Eora. I know there are many people in our community who are longtime players of this incredible game, so if this is your first experience with Deadfire, make sure you read the comments below. I am certain people will include differing perspectives or potentially even corrections to what I have said. After this video, I will start working on class guides, and as part of that, we will probably do builds for the game, which will provide even more useful information. By the way, I did guides and a review for the first Pillars of Eternity game as well, and there will be links to that content in the description below. Let's start all the way at the beginning with settings that should be considered when beginning a new game. At the bottom of the new game menu, you'll see a mask that can be clicked on, and it will reveal a list of Magran's fires. These are challenges you can add into your game to make it more difficult. There are options like preventing you from fleeing combat and automatically killing party members who are knocked out for more than 10 seconds. Another option causes equipment to degrade over time, and it must be repaired in the enchantment interface. You are free to enable all of these if you like, so it's a great way to give your playthrough an extra kick. Once you start a new game, you'll be asked if you want to play in turn-based or real-time with pause game mode. Once you make this choice, it cannot be changed. Pillars of Eternity was built to be a real-time with pause game, so that is going to feel more natural as well as being faster. In this mode, recovery time, which we'll get into later, dictates how often characters attack, and you can set up party AI so that some of your party members' actions are automated. Turn-based mode forces characters to act one at a time during their turn. It also changes many of the mechanics in combat. Recovery time instead becomes initiative, which determines how early and around each character can act. In an interesting twist, reload time also modifies initiative and can happen in between turns. Spells that have longer cast times will complete their cast at a later point in the turn order. This is a great option to enable if you are used to turn-based strategy games and would benefit from slowing things down. Once your game mode has been selected, you can choose a difficulty setting. Story mode is obviously for people who want zero challenge and are playing this game just to experience the story. Same with relaxed, although the mechanics are a little less biased towards you. Classic is the intended difficulty for you to play on and is evenly balanced all the way around. Veteran is the game's version of hard, providing an extra challenge but not sharply tilting stats in favor of enemies. Path of the Damned is the ultimate challenge and provides bonuses to enemies' accuracy, defenses, armor, penetration, and their health. It will also place significantly more enemies in each encounter, and their type will oftentimes be upgraded, causing them to use higher level spells and abilities. If you want even more challenge on top of that, Trial of Iron will limit you to only one save file that is automatically deleted after a party wipe. Once you start a game with this option, you cannot turn it off. There's also an expert mode, which will turn off any helper features in the game and force you to rely more on your intuition. Finally, level scaling can be applied in just the main story missions or across the entire game. This will help to ensure no matter what type of enemy you face, they will remain a threat. On the flip side, if you want to make the game a little easier your second time around, you can enable Berath's blessings. As you play the game, you'll unlock achievements that provide currency which can be used in this menu. Blessings can give you boosts such as starting the game at level 4, filling your pockets with more rare items, or even making your class grant double its usual skill bonuses. A great way to ensure a smoother playthrough. Shortly after jumping into a new game, you will get a menu to import your world state from Pillars of Eternity 1. It is not necessary to play Pillars of Eternity 1 in order for you to enjoy and understand Deadfire. There's a ton of information in this game that will get you up to speed. That being said, Deadfire does a lot to expand the Pillars world, and the foundation of that world building occurred in the first game, so if you have the patience to play it, I highly recommend you start there. But once again, it is not necessary. You can import an in-game save from Pillars 1, or use one of several pre-made saves that are provided to you. As far as what decisions are transferred over, there is very little difference between using a pre-made save or your own. There's a handful of dialogue options in the game that you can only trigger if you manually import a save, but none of them are particularly mind-blowing. Obviously, the advantage of importing your own save is that you can ensure each decision made is one consistent with who your character is, whereas the prepackaged options are all based on a character who sticks with one moral compass and therefore might not represent the complexity your decisions would have showcased. If that doesn't bother you, then don't feel like you are missing out by selecting one of the options provided. Shortly after importing your world state, you'll enter character creation, but to understand that conversation, we need to first walk through some of your general character information, starting with attributes. Unlike games such as Baldur's Gate 3 or Wrath of the Righteous, each attribute point provides an increase, so you don't have to worry about making sure all the values are even. Also keep in mind that all of the attributes help all of the classes to some degree, so which ones you should increase is based much more on your build and how you will utilize a character than it is on their class. Attributes are also sometimes used in dialogue or in text sequences to perform specific tasks. For those who are curious, Perception and Might are the two most used attributes in these situations. At the top of the list is Might, and it increases your damage, healing, and your fortitude defense. After we finish covering attributes, we'll go over all the defenses separately. While Might can be very important for damage dealers, it's absolutely viable to have lower Might and instead focus on the speed of your attacks to shred enemies. For healers, there's no substitute, and you definitely want a respectable Might score. Characters who potentially can ignore Might are those focusing mainly on crowd control, tanking, and buffing the party. Next on the list we have Constitution, which increases your health and fortitude defense. Deadfire discards the endurance mechanic from Pillars 1, so your health is a straightforward stat. Whether or not this stat is important depends on the makeup of your team. If you have a solid front line controlling the battlefield, then backline characters can safely dump Constitution. In my livestream playthrough of the game, my Constitution score was 3. Frontline characters shouldn't dump this stat, but with good buffs and tactics, you can keep those allies so well protected, enemies don't get past their defenses, and consequently, they don't need a high Constitution score. Coming up next, we have Dexterity, which increases your action speed and reflex defense. Action speed allows you to complete actions faster, and it reduces your recovery time, which determines how long you have to wait before performing another action. This delay is shown as a bar underneath your health after completing an action. So circling back to what I said about Might, you could keep that score around 12 or maybe 14, and instead dump more points into Dexterity, which will allow you to attack significantly more often. There are many things you can do to increase damage, but only a handful of options to increase action speed, especially if you are not a wizard. Keep in mind that action speed impacts you by a percentage amount. This means that it's much more useful when you are consistently performing actions that take a long time, such as reloading arquebuses. This stat also reaches a point of diminishing returns, so constantly focusing on stacking it high is counterproductive. Instead, you need to find a sweet spot based on the types of actions you use on a regular basis. Every character, regardless of playstyle, benefits from action speed. Next on the list is Perception, which increases your accuracy and reflex defenses. Accuracy determines how likely your attack is to hit, and it increases every level in an amount that is determined by your class. We will delve into accuracy more after covering the 4 defenses. Bottom line, it doesn't matter how much damage you can deal if your attacks don't connect. So if you are focused focused on dealing damage or casting crowd control spells, either you need a high accuracy or you need another party member dedicated to reducing enemy defenses to the point that you can penetrate them. Heals and buffs automatically connect, so characters mainly focused on those tasks don't need accuracy nearly as much. Next up is Intellect, which increases your area of effect, ability duration, and your will defenses. When using a damaging area of effect spell, you'll see a red center along with a yellow outer rim. The red center will damage all characters, regardless of whether they are friend or foe. You'll know if a spell is located where it will damage characters because their figure will become fully colored in. Red for enemies and green for allies. The yellow outer section will only damage enemies while your party members can safely stand in that area. Increasing intelligence expands the radius of the yellow section but keeps the red section the same, and consequently makes it much easier to impact more enemies while still not affecting your party. Clearly, this is critical for spellcasters, but it's also helpful for martial builds that utilize abilities which impact multiple enemies. Barbarians are a great example of this, as a high intellect will cause their Carnage passive to affect a much larger group of enemies. Last on the list is Resolve, and this attribute decreases the duration of hostile effects while also increasing your deflection and will defenses. This is another stat whose importance is determined by the makeup of your team. On the one hand, everything Resolve provides is very important for tanky characters. Consequently, unlike most other attributes, Resolve doesn't have diminishing returns, and pumping it sky high can provide fantastic results for tanking-oriented players. There really isn't such a thing as too much deflection. On the other hand, a quality priest or paladin can completely nullify nasty effects, rendering a high resolve score significantly less useful. If you don't have one of those, or the one you do have is much more focused on offense, putting several points into resolve is definitely an option to consider. Backline characters can safely dump this stat, and it's another one where my livestream Cipher only had a rank of 3. Now that we have reviewed all the attributes, let's look at the 4 defenses: Deflection, Fortitude, Reflex, and Will. All of these stats will steadily increase as you level up. There are also armor, weapon, consumables, and talents which can increase some of your defenses as well. The first one is Deflection, and it's used to resist direct melee and ranged attacks. Out of all the defenses, this is the one which gets tested the most, and it's absolutely critical your tank has a high score here. Again, points in Resolve will increase this stat. The next defense is Fortitude, and this measures your ability to resist attacks which target you internally, such as poison and disease. Ranks in Might and Constitution will increase this stat. Next on the list is Reflex, which allows you to dodge harmful areas of effect, such as fireballs. Ranks in Dexterity and Perception will increase this stat. The last defense is Will, and it helps you resist attacks that are mentally based, such as paralysis. Resolve will increase this stat. In Pillars of Eternity 1, all classes start with a rank of 20 in Fortitude, Reflex, and Will defense. They also had different starting amounts in Deflection depending on which class you chose. In Deadfire, the system is wide open, and now each class has its own starting amount for each defense. Some attacks have multiple forms of damage that will hit different defenses. For example, if an enemy attacks you with a poison dagger, the dagger attack will target deflection, and then if it hits, the poison will target fortitude. If your deflection is high enough to mitigate the initial dagger attack, then the poison attack won't occur. You'll need to carefully observe which stats enemies are targeting to determine the best response. Let's circle back and talk about accuracy. Every time you attack an enemy, you will target one of their 4 defenses. A number between 1 and 100 is randomly generated and added to the difference between your accuracy and the enemy's defense. Whatever that final number is determines the result of your attack. If the number is 25 or less, then your attack is a miss, which means it will deal no damage and inflict no status effects or afflictions, which we will talk about later. If the number is between 25 and 49, then the attack can become a graze, which means that the damage and affliction duration is reduced by 50%. In practice, there are a limited number of attacks that are even capable of grazing, so most of the time when your roll falls in this range, the outcome will still be a miss. If the number is between 50 and 99, then the attack will be a hit and deal standard damage along with the expected duration for your status or affliction effect. Finally, any roll that is above 100 results in a critical hit. This will increase the damage of your attack by 25%, and the duration of your afflictions will increase by the same amount. The attack will also have 50% more armor penetration. Bottom line, if your accuracy is significantly superior to the defense that your attack is targeting, then you are much more likely to get a hit. If your accuracy is significantly weaker than the defense you are targeting, then you are much more likely to miss. Unlike action speed, there is no diminishing returns when it comes to increasing accuracy. The more of it you have, the more likely you are to crit, so you really want it as high as possible. Technically, if your accuracy is more than 100 plus an enemy's defense, then the extra accuracy is wasted, but honestly, it's so difficult to hit that mark consistently that it's not really worth worrying about. If you are focused on debuffing or dealing damage, then get as much accuracy as you possibly can. Keep in mind that if your attack targets multiple defenses, then they will each have a separate accuracy roll. For example, again, if you attack with a poison dagger, the initial dagger attack will target an enemy's deflection. Then if that hits, the poison attack will roll separately to target the enemy's fortitude. Again, make sure you have a clear understanding of which defenses you regularly target so your debuffs can be most effective. No matter how high your defenses are, sometimes an attack is going to go through. When that occurs, you can mitigate the damage with your armor rating, which will be subtracted from any damage that enemies deal. So sometimes an enemy will breach your defenses, but your AR will be so high that you still don't experience any damage. Your AR is mainly going to come from armor or buffs, while some enemies have a natural AR that you will still have to pierce. There are 7 different types of damage you can defend against, and you will have an AR rating for each of them: slash, pierce, crush, burn, shock, corrode, and freeze. If you look in the lower left of your character sheet, your armor rating will be listed. That number applies to all types of damage unless one is specifically called out. So in this example, Eder has an armor rating of 13, but there are 2 exceptions. He has a 9 armor rating against pierce and a 9 armor rating against corrode. All other damage types will be mitigated by his 13 points of armor rating. When an enemy successfully hits you, the attack's armor penetration rank is compared with your armor rating. If the penetration is twice your AR, then it's considered a full penetration and 130% of the damage will be dealt. If the penetration meets or slightly exceeds your armor rating, then 100% of the damage will be dealt. Finally, if the penetration is less than your AR, then the damage will be reduced by up to 75% depending upon how high your AR is. The penetration rating of an attack will be compared with the armor rating that matches its damage type. So if you are trying to deal burn damage, then your penetration rating will be compared with the target's burn armor. The only exception to everything I just mentioned is raw damage, which automatically bypasses armor and consequently it doesn't need to penetrate. Also keep in mind that some enemies are completely immune to one or multiple types of damage, so it's important to have different options available at your disposal. Alright, now let's circle back to attributes for a bit. Each attribute has a list of afflictions and inspirations that can be applied to your character. Afflictions are groups of negative status effects based on a specific attribute. Might afflictions are staggered, dazed, and stunned. Staggered characters have -5 might and cannot engage enemies, which means foes can easily run past your tank or frontline character with no punishment. Dazed does the same thing, except you also experience a -4 penalty to penetration. Stun does all of this, and it prevents a character from taking actions, along with applying a -10 penalty to deflection. Obviously, this is a very powerful debuff. Applying an affliction such as Daze to an enemy who is already suffering from it will reset the timer to whichever hit has the highest duration. Remember, when you crit, the duration of your afflictions will be longer, so it's possible a follow-up hit will actually have a shorter duration than your first one. These afflictions are ranked, with staggered being at the bottom of the pack and stunned at the top. This is important to remember because afflictions in the same group will not stack with each other. If you attempt to apply Dazed on an enemy who is already stunned, nothing will happen. If you make an enemy stunned who was previously dazed, then that will clear the dazed effect, which is important to note if you are trying to stack multiple debuffs to trigger effects such as sneak attack. So in order to pile on multiple debuffs, you need to make sure you are using afflictions from various groups. If your character is resistant to a particular affliction, that means the effect will always be downgraded. So if an enemy attempts to apply stunned, instead you will be dazed. If they apply dazed, you will be staggered. And if they attempt to apply staggered, nothing will happen. On that same token, your character might be weak to a particular affliction, and that means it will automatically be upgraded. Staggered would automatically be upgraded to dazed, etc. Please note, resistances do not stack. You either have it or you do not. There are some afflictions which are not associated with a specific attribute. Many of these statuses you'll be familiar with from other games, such as being flanked, knocked prone, or knocked unconscious. Another example that you hear referenced a couple of times in this guide is a slog zone, which refers to environmental hazards, such as mud, which prevent you from running. On the opposite side of afflictions are inspirations, which are essentially buffs. They work the exact same way as their counterparts, grouped by specific attributes and ranked in a way that cancel each other out. At the bottom of the might inspiration list is strong, which provides a +5 bonus to might. Next is tenacious, which provides the same bonus and a +2 increase to penetration. Finally, energized does all that and allows your critical hits to interrupt enemies. Once again, inspirations in the same group will not stack, so you need to pull from multiple groups in order to pile on buffs. Inspirations and afflictions that are from the same group cancel each other out, regardless of the effect's rank. So for example, if one of your party members is stunned, you can remove that effect by casting the strong inspiration on that character. Even though stunned is the most powerful might affliction and strong is the weakest might inspiration, it will still completely remove it. Keep in mind, in that example, strong would not be applied to the character. Strong and stunned would cancel each other out, and the party member would have no might afflictions or inspirations. The opposite is also true, so low-level afflictions can remove powerful inspirations. Alright, now let's talk about one of the most important mechanics that can impact your character: power level. Your power level, or PL for short, effectively governs how you can perform non-weapon active abilities and use consumables. Each rank in PL gives you a 5% bonus in healing, damage, and effect duration, a +2 bonus to defenses except deflection, a +1 bonus to deflection, a +1 bonus to accuracy, and a 0.25 bonus to penetration. So obviously, PL is going to be very impactful in the situations where it applies. Power level is not one set number across the board. Instead, you will have different PLs based upon what you are attempting to do. Let's start with the PL for your class abilities. On the left side of your character sheet, you'll see markers designating when your power level is going to increase. If you are a single class, you'll get 9 ranks of power levels, and the first 7 of them will come from every other character level. If you multi-class, then you'll only get 7 ranks of power levels, and and they'll come once every 3 character levels. When you use a class ability, its power level will be determined by the power level from your character level minus the abilities level. So, for example, let's say you're a level 5 wizard and you want to use Chill Fog. At level 5, your power level would be level 3, and Chill Fog is a level 1 spell. Therefore, you can cast Chill Fog with a power level of 2. Your power level of 3 minus the level of the ability, which is 1, gives you a power level of 2. This system allows you to make great use of lower level abilities late in the game because your power level will significantly increase their effects. Consumables also have their own separate power level that is based on the associated skill. The power level when you use drugs, potions, and poisons is determined by your alchemy rank. Each rank in alchemy will add a 5% bonus to the duration, healing, and damage done by your drugs and potions, along with giving them a +1 accuracy bonus. Keep in mind the accuracy bonus is based on actually using the item and isn't applied to yourself for an attack. Poisons would receive half these increases, rounded down to the nearest whole number. Scrolls, explosives, and traps work the same way, scaling off Arcana, explosives, and mechanics respectively. Power levels do not come into play for abilities that utilize equipped weapons to perform primary or full attacks. The only exception to this is if you are playing as a monk, since the damage from their fist scales off of power levels. Sometimes an attack will have a secondary effect that does take power levels into account. One of the ways you can increase the power level for an ability is by empowering it. Empower is an ability you will first gain at level 2, and it can only be used once per encounter. What this ability does depends on how you apply it. If you apply it to yourself, it will refill half of your expended ability resources. This is invaluable for characters like wizards who can quickly run out of all their spells. If you use it on a spell or ability that power levels applies to, then it will increase the power level for that spell or ability by 5. Obviously, this is a big deal and can let you pump out a tremendous amount of damage. Finally, if you use this on a spell or ability that does perform a weapon attack, it will increase the accuracy by 10 and the penetration by 2.5. Both of these are massive increases, and you can see careful utilization of Empower will result in big gains. By the time you are level 20, you will be able to use Empower 3 times without resting, and some passives will increase that number, although none of them will allow you to use it more than once per fight. Quick note before we move to character creation. As you explore the game world, you'll come across a wealth of different characters who can be recruited into your party. Some of them are companions and others are sidekicks. Companions are characters who have personal quests, full dialogue trees, reactivity, and just in general the amount of content you would expect from a party member. Sidekicks are characters who don't have nearly as much content. In fact, oftentimes they have nothing more to say once they are recruited. However, they'll have mechanics and class options that are unavailable to your companions, so sometimes you might prefer to use them. For more information on this, be sure to check out my video ranking all of the different party members. Alright, now that we've reviewed all that information, let's circle back to character creation. The choice between male and female is just a matter of personal preference and doesn't change in-game content. Romances are not gate-locked behind this decision. Next, you get to choose your race. Keep in mind, while a couple of these options are closely tied to a specific faction, your race doesn't lock you into siding with that group. The first option is Aumaua. This race provides you with a +2 bonus in might, so it's a great option for damage dealers and healers. They are also physically the largest race, so if you want a tank character who takes up more space to lock down foes, this is the one to choose. This option has 2 sub-races. Island Aumaua, or Juana as they are commonly referred to, originally settled the Deadfire archipelago thousands of years ago. They are also one of the major factions in the game. Consequently, you meet a ton of these characters, and there are many opportunities for unique dialogue options. In fact, Island Aumaua has more unique dialogues than almost all the other sub-races combined. You will still be looked at as an outsider, but many people will be a little warmer towards you. Keep in mind, the vast majority of this content doesn't have significant impacts, so it's strictly to pull you more into role-playing a specific character. This sub-race also provides immunity to the Slog Zone affliction during combat. Your party member Maya is an Island Aumaua. The other sub-race is Coastal Aumaua, or the Rautai as they are commonly referred to. They lead the Royal Deadfire Company, which is another major faction. Rautai have traveled from a distant land that is ravaged by storms, which make the area uninhabitable, and they seek to make the Deadfire Archipelago their new home. Rautai have a strict, disciplined military culture, and they believe is superior to the tribal, decentralized culture the Awana have established. Many other characters see them as warmongers, but they are not inherently evil. Just in a desperate situation, they are willing to aggressively rectify. Choosing this race will provide you with resistance to might afflictions, which is obviously very nice to have. Next on the list is Dwarf. This option provides you with a +2 bonus to might, along with a +1 bonus to constitution, but it also imposes a -1 penalty to dexterity. So obviously dwarves lend themselves very well to frontline fighter builds. This option has two sub-races. Boreal Dwarves will allow you to convert 50% of misses into grazes when facing primordial and wilder enemies. This is a decent early game buff, but long term you shouldn't be missing on a consistent basis, so I don't consider this subclass a good option. The other subclass is Mountain Dwarf, and it provides resistance to constitution afflictions, which can significantly limit how much healing you receive. Resistance to those effects is great for a frontline fighter. The sidekick Constantine is a Mountain Dwarf. Next on the list are Elves, and this option provides you with a +1 bonus to Dexterity and Perception. This is fantastic for just about any build. There are two sub-races, and the first one is Pale Elf, which provides you with a +4 bonus to Burn and Freeze damage reduction, which will be added to your armor rating value. This is definitely nice and helps make your character more sturdy. The other subclass is Wood Elf, and this option provides you with resistance to dexterity afflictions. These statuses impair your movement or flat out paralyze you, so this buff is fantastic. Your party member Aloth is a Wood Elf, while your sidekick Yedwin is a Pale Elf. Next on the list is Godlike. These are characters who have been blessed by a deity at birth. Physically, you will look like one of the other races, except your head, which will change based upon the deity who has blessed you. There's a lot of reactivity regarding godlikes, and when it comes to base races, this option by far has the most unique dialogue choices. Godlike characters cannot use headgear, which is a massive penalty, but some of them get really nice buffs to make up for it. This race provides a +1 bonus to Dexterity and Intellect, which is great for spellcasters or any character who wants to affect multiple enemies. This option has 4 sub-races, which each represent a blessing from a different deity. Death Godlike have been blessed by Berath and are considered to be harbingers of doom. Consequently, the majority of them are killed at birth, and those who survive are usually reduced to being slaves or beggars. This sub-race will provide you with a 20% bonus to damage against enemies who are near death, which means they have less than 25% health. It also provides you with a +3 bonus to power level when you are near death. This is unquestionably one of the most powerful buffs a sub-race can provide, but most characters shouldn't be reaching near death status on a consistent basis. One exception to that is a high constitution barbarian, who already benefits from low health builds. Fire Godlike have been blessed by Magran and are both revered and feared due to the false belief that they can awaken volcanoes. Choosing this option provides you with a +2 bonus to burn armor. In addition, whenever you are bloodied or near death, you'll receive a +1 bonus to armor rating and deal 2 to 4 burn damage to enemies who attack you in melee. You'll receive the bloodied status when health is between 50 and 25%. This buff is unimpressive, especially considering you cannot wear headgear. Moon Godlike have been blessed by Andra and are considered to be the most socially acceptable godlike option. Sailors and seafarers most especially see them as bringers of good fortune. If you select this option once per encounter when you are hurt, bloodied, or near death, you will perform an area of effect heal. You receive the hurt status when health drops below 75%. Please note that each status is a separate trigger, so during the fight you could potentially release 3 separate waves of healing. This ability is impacted by might, intelligence, and any related bonuses you have, so it can potentially restore your entire party for a massive amount 3 times in every fight. Please also note, if you, for example, drop from 100% health down to 50% health, this will not trigger 2 waves of healing. You'll just get 1 for being bloodied and lose out on the 1 for being hurt. Still, in my opinion, Moon Godlikes are the most powerful healers in the game. Last on the list is Nature Godlike, and they have been blessed by Galawain. They have the most non-threatening features out of all the options, and similar to their Moon brethren, Nature Godlike are considered to be more socially acceptable. This option provides you with a +1 bonus to all power levels anytime you are under the effects of a body inspiration. That's a big deal, and makes this one of the most powerful sub-races. After selecting your sub-race, you can choose the body shape of the other races that appeals to you the most. Your party members Palagina, Vatnir, and Tekehu are avian, ending, and marine godlikes respectively. You are not able to select any of those sub-race options. Next on the list is Human. Picking this option provides you with a +1 bonus to Might and Resolve, which is fantastic for frontline fighters. There are 3 human sub-races, and they all provide the same bonus. Fighting Spirit is triggered when you have less than 50% health and provides a +7 bonus to accuracy, along with a 15% bonus to damage that lasts until the end of the encounter. A 15% increase to damage is obviously nothing to scoff at, and humans are a really nice pickup. It's worth noting that Ocean Folk are from the Valian Republics, which is run by the Valian Trading Company, another one of the major factions in the game. Ocean Folk also previously dominated the Old Valia Empire, which is where the Principes and Patrina come from. Consequently, Ocean Folk get slightly more unique dialogue than the other human subrace options. Your party members Eder and Shodi are Meadow Folk, while the sidekick Facina is an Ocean Folk. Your sidekick Reke is a Storm Folk, which you cannot select. Last but certainly not least is Orlan. They are known for being very small but also quite clever. Many people are prejudiced towards Orlan and see them as natural criminals, so selecting this option will direct some racism towards you. Orlans get a +2 bonus to Perception and a +1 bonus to Resolve, along with a -1 penalty to Might. This works for many builds, but I most especially like using Orlans as rogues who sneak up and stab enemies to interrupt their actions. There are 2 sub-race options, and the first one is Wild Orlan. This provides you with resistance towards Resolve Afflictions, which reduce your power levels and can flat out force you to flee combat. Absolutely, this is a great bonus regardless of your playstyle. The other sub-race is Hearth Orlan, and they can convert 10% of their hits into crits when attacking an enemy who is also engaged by an ally. This is fantastic, especially on a character with high dexterity who can really churn out the hits and generate crits quickly. Your party member Seraphin is a Wild Orlan, while your sidekick Merca is a Hearth Orlan. After selecting your race, you can select a class, but first you have to choose whether you will go single or multi-class. A similar choice is provided every time you recruit a new party member, and in both cases, the decision cannot be changed later on. We've already discussed how multi-classing limits your max power level. The other issue with multi-classing is that it prevents you from reaching the last 2 levels of the class, which sometimes contains the most powerful abilities. There are a few things to keep in mind when deciding whether or not to multi-class. Dedicated spell classes need all the power levels they can get, and oftentimes have very powerful late game abilities. So if your goal is to be the best spellcaster possible, then you don't want to multi-class options like Wizard or Druid. However, you might be focused on martial abilities, but just want a little bit of spellcasting to mix things up. In that case, multi-classing makes complete sense. Obviously, multiclassing also makes sense if the last two levels of a class are lackluster and you are not missing much by combining it with something else. In many cases, multiclassing is absolutely worth it and provides a very powerful option. We are going to rank all the different classes and comb through their mechanics in separate videos, so I'm not going to do a deep dive in this guide. Instead, we will briefly gloss over each one. Barbarians pick up a big weapon, get mad, and obliterate everything in front of them. They have a passive called Carnage, which causes all nearby enemies to experience a portion of the damage that they deal. This makes them great multi-class options, but they also have fantastic late game abilities, so single-classing Barbarians is very powerful as well. The game doesn't provide you with a compelling pure Barbarian option. Reke and Constantine are sidekicks with limited content. Seraphim is fantastic, but the story leans heavily into him being a Cipher, so it would be odd to remove that. Consequently, running a single-class Barbarian might allow you to fill a team gap. Chanters allow you to sing phrases that buff allies and devastate enemies. After singing a few phrases, you can use invocations which have very powerful effects. Chanters make your whole party better by literally just standing around even if they aren't attacking. Very unique and interesting class that is much improved from the first Pillars game where it was confusing to use. Chanters are great multi-classing options because some of the best phrases come well before the last two levels, so you can easily pick up powerful passives. Also, the last two levels of this class are unimpressive. Pallegina and Tekehu can both serve as fantastic multi-class chanters. If you want a pure chanter, it might make sense to roll it yourself, because while Tekehu can do this, his subclass removes the ability to use summoning invocations, which are very powerful chanter options. Next up is Cipher, which is basically like a warlock, allowing your attacks to build up a resource that lets you cast spells endlessly. In Pillars 1, it was the best class, but I find this a little less impressive in Deadfire. It's still a great cow-controlling beast, allowing you to paralyze, knock prone, or even dominate enemies pretty much at will. The last two levels are nothing special, so Ciphers are a great multi-classing option. Also, in case you were wondering, Ciphers, Druids, Priests, and Rangers all get a decent amount of unique dialogue in the game. The other base classes lag far behind. Yedwin and Seraphim can both serve as Ciphers, whether you prefer them pure or multi-class. Druid is next up on the list and is just as incredible as it was in the first game. Druid houses amazing area of effect spells that can stun enemies, heal allies, or absolutely obliterate large groups. You can also spirit shift into a beast form if you prefer to deal with foes up close. Tons of versatility and really cool all the way around. You cannot go wrong with Druid. It has really awesome high level abilities and benefits strongly from PL, so single class Druids are phenomenal, but it can help give martial classes a little bit more spellcasting ability, so there are some good multi-classing options as well. Facina can serve as a multi-class druid, but I don't recommend that because from a roleplay standpoint, she's pretty obviously a pure wizard. Tekehu can serve in this role, but his subclass removes access to fire and creature spells. Personally, I don't think that's an issue because I love druid for stunning and electricity, but it might be a problem for you. Next up is Fighter, which focuses on tanking and frontlining. Having a solid tank in the group makes everything better. Plus, the last two levels of Fighter suck, so it's great for multi-classing. Even better, Fighter mixes well with just about any class, so you can honestly just go crazy. Your party member Eder has access to Fighter, but more importantly, he can combine Fighter and Rogue to create a Swashbuckler, which is definitely one of the best tanks in the game. Next on the list is Monk, which is in my opinion the best single target melee class in the game. Monks can just pile on a ton of damage very quickly, and they are super mobile as well, swiftly moving into whatever spot the player prefers. Similar to Barbarians, Monks make fantastic single class options, but they also play well with other casting classes. Your party member Shodi can run as a pure Monk or combine it with Priest to create the Contemplative class. Next up we have Paladin, one of the tankiest classes in the game. Right off the bat, you get a +8 passive bonus to all defenses that can be upgraded to a +10. That's a massive increase, especially right at the start of the game, so Paladins are a great multi-class option anytime you want to make a squishier class a little bit tankier, such as Rogue. In addition to this, Paladins make great healers, buffers, and they can dish out a solid amount of damage. The subclasses are all different Paladin orders. This creates the illusion that the class provides a great role-playing opportunity, but there's very little Paladin-specific dialogue in the game. You aren't missing anything from the last 2 levels of Paladin, so go crazy with the combinations. Your party member Palagina can serve as a Paladin, but she has a locked-in subclass that may or may not appeal to you. Priest is next on the list, and in the first Pillars game, it was one of the strongest classes you could get. Not quite as good in Deadfire, but it's still an awesome combination of buffing, healing, and laying the smackdown on enemies. The subclasses are deities you can devote yourself to. Deities factor heavily into the game, and consequently priest subclasses get the most unique dialogue out of all the options. Similar to Druid, Priest works best as a single class since it heavily benefits from power levels and late game options. But if you want to give your martial character some powerful buffs, Priest is a great way to go. Shodi can serve as your priest, although she is locked into being a follower of God, which may or may not appeal to you. Next on the list is Ranger, and this class focuses on ranged martial abilities while also having a pet. Guns are a ton of fun in Pillars, and most classes cannot use them as well as Rangers can. Similar to Barbarians, Rangers have fantastic late game options, making them good to single class, but they can also play well with other classes such as Cipher. Maya can serve as your Ranger, and considering the unique passive she gets, there's a case to be made she's a better one than what you could create on your own. Next on the list is Rogue, and they specialize in sneak attacks, which lets them deal 30% more damage against enemies who are flanked or suffering from an affliction. Pound for pound, no class deals more damage to single targets than a properly built Rogue. The trade-off is that they are very squishy, which forces you to micromanage them. Luckily, the last 2 levels of Rogue are mediocre, so they are a great option to multi-class into something else that makes them tankier. Paladin or Fighter are great options, and as I already mentioned, Eder can fill this role nicely. Last but certainly not least, we have Wizard. With spells for just about every occasion, this option is fantastic. Wizards heavily benefit from late game options and PL, so it works great as a single class. It's also great to multi-class Wizard with melee characters because you can summon weapons and there are multiple buffs that will make you significantly tankier. Aloth and Facina can both serve as your wizards. They both work fine, but you could definitely make a better optimized wizard if you were motivated to do so. After choosing your class and subclass, you can select your attribute point distribution, and we have already covered the options here. Once this is done, you can select the culture your character identifies with. By far, Deadfire Archipelago gets the most unique dialogue options, and number 2 on this list is the Raotai. The others barely have any reactivity, so you could just choose them based on the attribute bonus. After this, you can select your background. Aristocrat gets the most unique dialogue options, but it's not a crazy amount, so just pick whatever makes sense for your character. Once this is done, you can select 2 weapon proficiencies. You do not need to be proficient in a weapon to properly use it. However, each weapon has a modal that can only be used if you are proficient in that particular weapon. Modals are modes that change how you use a weapon. For example, pistols have a modal that decreases reload time by 50%, while reducing range accuracy by 15%. There are a lot of different weapon types, and each one has a unique modal, so it's important to experiment so you know which one suits you best. That wraps up all the information you should need regarding character creation, so now let's look at skills. In character creation, you will get bonuses to skills based on the class and background that you select. If you multi-class, then an average of those bonuses will be used. Afterwards, you will receive skill points during every level up, 1 for active skills and 1 for passive skills. Some skill checks will only take into account the ranks of 1 person, while other checks will allow the party to assist. When party members assist on a skill check, they only provide a portion of their ranks. party members must be close to you in order to assist. This breakdown shows you the rate at which party members assist on skill checks. The first number is the total sum of all your companions' ranks in a particular skill. The second number is how much they will increase your skill check. As you can see, this is a system of diminishing returns. There are different trains of thought regarding if it's best to put a couple of points into all of the skills for companions, or if it's best to focus on a couple of key options. Do what works best for you. The max rank on any skill check is 20, so never go above that number. The vast majority of skill checks don't go above 16. Let's go over the list, starting with active skills. The first active skill is Alchemy, and as I have already mentioned, it determines how powerful your poisons, drugs, and potions are. If you plan to use those a lot, then obviously this is a skill you will want to invest in. There are a ton of very useful consumables with powerful buffs that will benefit from high ranks in Alchemy. If that doesn't interest you, then you can safely ignore this option. Next on the list is Arcana, and as we have already mentioned, it determines how powerful your scrolls are, and frankly which scrolls you can use. Having powerful scrolls on deck is a great way to give your spellcasters extra firepower when they run out of spells. It can also be nice to have Arcana on non-spellcasters to let them use scrolls which apply useful buffs. Similar to Alchemy, if you have no intention of using scrolls, then you can safely ignore this. Next on the list we have Athletics, which serves a double purpose. In combat, Athletics provides the second wind ability, which allows you to recover some lost health once per encounter. It is also heavily used in skill checks to determine your effectiveness at swimming, running, climbing, and similar actions. This is absolutely a critical skill, so make sure at least one person in your party specializes in it. Next we have Explosives, which determines your effectiveness with bombs, noisemakers, and similar devices. Some bombs have very nice crowd control effects, such as freezing or stunning enemies. Noisemakers are useful to draw people away when you want to steal an item. It's expensive to make these items a core part of your playthrough, but it's certainly interesting. Bombs can be used in whale hunting as well. If you don't want to use explosives, you can completely ignore this skill. Next up is the most important skill on the list, Mechanics. This determines your ability to open locks and pick up traps. There are a ton of traps in this game, and walking over them can oftentimes be deadly. Mechanics also let you lay down traps for enemies, but the damage is paltry, so it's only worth doing if you really need to put an affliction onto an enemy. Traps that paralyze can be really handy. In addition to this, there's quite a bit of loot behind locked doors and chests, so it's absolutely essential at least one character has a high rank in this skill. Next on the list is Sleight of Hand, which lets you pickpocket characters or even place items into their pockets, such as bombs against unsuspecting enemies. There are some nice items you can only get by killing certain characters, and pickpocketing allows you to retrieve them without doing that. Also, many of the NPCs you encounter have upgradable materials that can be looted by a character with this skill. Otherwise, Sleight of Hand isn't particularly useful and can be safely skipped. Coming up next, we have Stealth, another very important skill. This measures your ability to quietly sneak in the presence of other characters. While exploring in hostile territory, you should always be sneaking, because that lets you get the first shot on an unsuspecting group, which is very advantageous. There's also quite a bit of items that can be looted if you are able to hide from nearby NPCs. Finally, there's also a lot of text interactions where you can sneak closer to a group or hear what they are talking about if you can successfully sneak. Absolutely, you want somebody skilled in this area. That's all the active skills in the game, so now let's move to the passive list, and first up is Bluff. Persuasion in Deadfire is split up between 3 different skills: Bluff, Diplomacy, and Intimidate. All of these skills are equally important, so I would say have at least 2 of them covered. Passing these checks unlocks a ton of content, provides better quest rewards, and in many cases makes the game easier. If you only have room to max 1, Diplomacy slightly edges out the other 2. The next skill is History, which allows you to demonstrate a comprehensive understanding of Eora's civilization across multiple generations. This can sometimes provide extra content or interesting information, but it's by no means a necessary skill to have. Your choice whether or not it's worth it. Next on the list is Insight, another must-have skill. Insight allows you to look beyond words and see what a person's true motivations are. It's checked more than all the other skills in the game. Even more importantly, it has the most checks where the party cannot assist compared to any other skills in the game. So if at all possible, put this on your main character. Next is Metaphysics, which measures your ability to understand animancy, adra, and all matters relating to the soul. Similar to History, this skill will provide you with interesting context, but it's by no means a must-have option. Next up we have Religion, which allows you to demonstrate an understanding of various religious institutions in Eora. There are a ton of shrines out in the game world where you can rest if you pass the religion check. Many of these checks aren't larger than 6, so even a small investment here can be helpful. Similar to History and Metaphysics, this option will provide you with more context and dialogue exchanges. It's also worth noting that some items scale off religion, including Shodi's sickle and hammer. Next is Streetwise, which determines your street smarts and ability to interact with thugs or criminals. This is a great skill to have, especially if you plan to socialize with the underworld. It's checked very often and provides you with additional money or loot. Last on the list is Survival, which measures your ability to pull information from nature or campsites out in the wilderness. This skill comes up a ton, and you should definitely have one party member specialized in this area. Alright, with all that out the way, let's talk about bonus stacking. Passive bonuses that you get from your class or the right side of your ability tree will stack with just about anything. In a huge change from the first Pillars game, bonuses from equipment will stack. So you can have dexterity bonuses on your head, neck, and cape, and all of it will count. Party-wide buffs from pets are part of this group as well, and consequently, they will stack with everything except other party-wide pet buffs. Conversion bonuses do not stack, but instead, they are each rolled separately. So if you have a 10% chance to convert a hit to a crit from your sword, and then a 30% chance to convert a hit to a crit from your helmet, that doesn't result in a 40% chance to convert a hit to a crit. Instead, both of these chances will be rolled separately to see if a conversion is performed. Some buffs have similar effects, but they are worded differently, and most of them stack. For example, if you have a buff that provides a plus 20 bonus to deflection, and then another buff that provided a plus 5 bonus to all defenses, usually those will work together. The game won't suppress the deflection bonus. We've already mentioned that bonuses from the same inspiration group will not stack. Active bonuses, which come from consumables such as food or potions and abilities, also do not stack. This includes auras from paladins and stances from fighters. Basically anything that is on the left side of your ability tree or is a one-time use will not stack with each other. Weapon modals are also grouped with this list and will not stack with your other buffs. What I have provided are general guidelines you can follow to ensure buffs stack properly. In practice, there are a ton of exceptions to these rules, and some abilities work in a manner that I would say is inconsistent. To be honest, Deadfire does a poor job of making it clear how bonuses interact with each other and what does or does not stack. If you are not sure something is working in the way you would expect, check the character sheet and/or the combat log to determine what is actually counting for your character. Next, let's talk about equipment. When you look at unique armor or weapons, right at the value, you will see its quality, which ranges from fine all the way to legendary. You can increase the quality of an item by pressing the enchant button at the bottom of the tooltip and opening the enchantment window. On the left side, you'll see a list of all the items in your inventory that can be enchanted. On the right, at the top of this window, you'll see the enchantments that are currently on the item. Right below this is where you can upgrade the quality. Clicking on an enchantment option will show you at the bottom what materials are required to complete the enchantment. You can acquire these materials by looting the environment, defeating monsters, and they can sometimes be purchased from shops. It's very useful to check the inventory of shops that sell upgrade materials because oftentimes it's easier to buy them than wait for the exact gem or monster drop that you need. Gold is plentiful by mid-game. The next section allows you to enchant an object with unique buffs. Oftentimes, these buffs are mutually exclusive, and you have to determine which option fits best with the build you are running. Some equipment will already be exceptional, superb, or even legendary when you loot it, along with having unique buffs. Circling back to the armor tooltip, you can see that it lists the base armor value along with any special armor values you have. You can hover over these numbers to see what is contributing to the rank. Next is the recovery time, which is how much your recovery time is increased due to the armor you are wearing. It is significantly larger for heavy armor compared to medium and light options. Most heavy armor increases your recovery time by 55%, and consequently, it's worth considering only putting medium or even light armor on your party members, even if they are frontline fighters. Weapons can also be enchanted and have the same quality ranges. Weapons also list value and recovery time on their tooltip. Again, heavier weapons will have longer recovery times. Guns have reload time instead of recovery time, but the stat serves the same purpose. Damage, penetration, and attack time are also listed. Obviously, attack time is how long it takes to attack, and it's longer when using heavier weapons. You can also see your accuracy versus deflection, which is the defense your weapons will attempt to hit the vast majority of the time. If you wield weapons one-handed, then you'll get a bonus to accuracy. Dual wielding weapons removes the accuracy bonus, but you'll receive a 30% reduction in recovery time. Bashing shields can also count as weapons. That means when looking at the ability tree, you can create a character who uses the weapon and shield style along with the two weapon style at the same time. When using an offensive ability, it will oftentimes distinguish between dealing a primary or a full attack. This is very important to note if you are dual wielding. Primary attacks only use the weapon in your main hand. Full attacks allow you to attack with your weapon in both hands. Consequently, primary attacks are beneficial when you are wielding two-handed weapons, while full attacks are fantastic for dual wielding specialists. When using a full attack while dual wielding, both weapons will deal slightly less damage, but many weapons have useful effects that trigger upon a successful hit. You can see what on-hit effects a weapon has by circling back to the tooltip. There are many stats outside of the basic ones that might be listed depending upon the weapon you are looking at. Ranged weapons have a range, some of them have multiple projectiles. Shields provide more deflection, but larger ones will also have large accuracy penalties. There's a lot of variation. Make sure you carefully look at the tooltip of any weapon you want to equip. All characters come with 2 weapon sets unlocked. This allows you to carry weapons for different occasions, such as a pistol for ranged combat in weapon set 1 and a two-handed weapon for melee combat in weapon set 2. There's a passive option in the skill trees to unlock another weapon set, and some armors have enchantments that provide an additional weapon set as well. Switching to a different weapon set in combat takes 2 seconds. This can be reduced by increasing your action speed. In the first Pillars game, you could pick up the Quick Switch talent, which would significantly reduce the recovery time when switching between weapons or spells in grimoires. In Deadfire, that passive is only available to fighters who have reached level 7. Spell tooltips will contain very similar information, including range, penetration, and damage. Attack time is replaced with cast time, and it essentially means the same thing. What you can do with spells that you cannot with most weapons is interrupt. This is a big change from the first Pillars game that allowed you to potentially interrupt with all attacks. In Deadfire, only some offensive spells and abilities can interrupt, while most weapons cannot. When interrupting an enemy, you will cancel their current action and extend their recovery time by 2 seconds. Some interrupts will also knock the enemy prone. Spells or abilities capable of interruption will contain a section in their tooltip labeled Interrupt On, and this tells you how hard it has to hit in order to interrupt an enemy. For example, Chain Lightning interrupts when it crits. This is very powerful since the spell can hit up to 5 enemies, so potentially you could cancel the actions of an entire enemy group. Interrupt attempts are canceled by an enemy's concentration rating. In the first Pillars game, concentration was a stat that could be increased with resolve, and everyone received a base amount of 75. All of that has been removed in Deadfire, and instead, everyone starts with 0 concentration. In addition, concentration has been changed to a stacking status effect that can be applied with spells, talents, or abilities. Each stack provides you with 1 point in concentration, and each point will nullify an interrupt attempt. If an enemy attempts to interrupt you while multiple stacks of concentration are active, then the stack that was applied first will be removed. When you use an ability that provides concentration, the additional point will remain even after the ability duration has expired. So for example, if you use the Fighter's Discipline Barrage ability, it will provide the concentration status for 15 seconds, giving you 1 point in concentration. That concentration point will remain even after the 15 seconds of Discipline Barrage is finished. Alright, now let's cover a few things you should take care of before entering combat. When you click on a character's portrait, the first option all the way to the left will tell you what the AI the party member is set to. They can either have the AI turned on, turned off, or they can be set to auto attack. If you right click on any of the options, it will open up the AI editor, which allows you a great deal of control over how party members react to combat. Party members will have 2 stock options listed, which provide some rudimentary AI setup. You can copy one of these options and create your own custom AI for the party member to follow. This system is extremely granular, and you can absolutely reach a point where you never have to touch a button in combat. Otherwise, you can leave it off if you prefer to make all of the decisions. There's a ton of different ways to set up AI, so I won't cover it here. If you would be interested in a video dedicated to that subject, let me know down in the comments below and I'd be happy to make one. In the middle bottom left portion of your interface, there is a formation button. This determines the formation your party will travel in while exploring the world. This is important because usually enemies will attack from the front, so you want your tank or frontline fighters leading to meet the challenge. It also helps to ensure your squishies are far away from the heart of the action. The first 3 formations will organize party members based on the order of their portraits. The last 2 are customizable and let you place party members in position regardless of portrait order. In the bottom middle of the interface is a pause button that lights up when you press spacebar to pause the action. To the right is a fast forward button that causes your whole party to move faster outside of combat. I pretty much keep that on at all times. As I mentioned before, when entering combat, you almost always want to sneak. This will allow you to choose when to kick things off and allow your ranged combatants to get the first hit. When 2 characters are within melee distance and one of them attacks with a melee weapon, they will become engaged. You know when you are engaged with an enemy because green arrows will point towards the nearby foe. This mechanic is key for controlling the front line. When a character is initially engaged, they stop moving. They can then move around the character they are engaged with. However, attempting to break away from that person will trigger a disengagement attack. A disengagement attack is a free automatic action that has no recovery time and momentarily stops the enemy's movements. It also receives a +5 bonus to accuracy and deals twice as much damage. Typically, when this attack finishes, you'll be able to re-engage with the opponent. However, there is a 2-second delay before you are able to do that. Most characters are only able to engage with 1 enemy at a time. This is an issue because many enemies will try to make a mad dash past your front line to reach much softer backline targets. If you're approached by 2 enemies, then you will engage with one and the other will be able to run past you with no punishment. One way to deal with this is having a tank with more engagement slots, so they can hold multiple enemies at one time. There's also a wide variety of classes, abilities, and gear that interact with engagement. You can also increase the effectiveness of your disengagement attacks, even knocking enemies prone when they attempt to run away from you. Enemies are of course capable of engaging with your party members, and all of your backline crew will need abilities to use when enemies close within melee distance. Some of your party members can gain immunity to engagement, and enemies can use the same effect, making it very difficult to stop them from getting where they want to go. Consequently, while having a tank can be nice, it's not the end-all be-all when it comes to controlling the front line, and it's not necessary to have one. You'll have a wealth of crowd control effects to ensure enemies don't blow up your formations. When you have one of your party members selected and you put your mouse cursor over an enemy, you'll see two stats pop up over their heads. The first number is the percentage chance that your attack will succeed. It compares the attack you are attempting to do with the enemy defense that applies to that attack. So if you are performing a melee attack, it will check deflection. But if you are attempting to petrify an enemy, it will check fortitude. The symbol to the left of the percentage tells you what defense the enemy would use. Keep in mind that grazes are considered to be a success, so the percentage chance that you will do a regular hit will oftentimes be less than the number you see here. The two numbers on the second row tell you how much penetration your attack has versus how much armor the enemy has for that type of damage. Remember, there are different types of damage such as slashing, piercing, or fire, and each one has its own armor. The symbol to the right of the percentage tells you what type of damage the attack will deal. The percentage amount is how much damage your attack will do. This number can be more than 100% when you are able to over-penetrate. The first number tells you how much more penetration your attack has compared to the enemy's armor. Hovering over an enemy also brings up a tooltip in the upper right that provides a breakdown of their defenses and armor along with their beneficial and hostile effects. This is a great way to see the types of attacks an enemy is vulnerable to. How much information you are able to see depends on how much of the bestiary you have unlocked. Every time you face a new enemy, a new entry is added to the bestiary, and once you have faced them multiple times, all the information in the bestiary will be filled out. To the left of your portrait, you'll see 3 empty dots. Each time you receive an injury, one of these dots will fill with red, and a debuff will be applied to your character. The type of debuff depends on the random injury that you have received. Some of them can be very debilitating, such as fatigue, which lowers your accuracy by 5, your defenses by 10, and reduces your max health by 15%. Injuries can occur when you step on traps or you are knocked down in combat. It can also occur during scripted interactions if you fail a skill check. If you get 2 of the same injuries, they will be upgraded to a major injury, causing 50% of your crits to be downgraded to regular hits, reducing your penetration by 2 and reducing your max health by 15%. If you get 3 of the same injuries, they will be upgraded to a critical injury, causing 100% of crits to be downgraded to hits, reducing defenses by 20 and reducing max health by 15%. If you have 3 injuries and are knocked out or receive a 4th one, you will automatically die. Injuries can only be removed by resting. When traveling between islands, you'll use a ship and will be responsible for the upkeep of it. There's a vendor you'll meet early in Nekataka who sells most of the upgrades for your ship. There are ship battles in the game, but they are mediocre, so Obsidian added an option to skip them and immediately attempt to board enemy ships. Consequently, you don't need to worry about any offense when upgrading your ship, and the cannons are irrelevant. The sails, anchor, and lantern can be upgraded, and this will increase your travel speed, which is very useful. You'll also recruit crew members throughout your adventure. There are 7 different job traits a crew member can have, including cook, doctor, and navigator. As they serve in this role, they will level up to rank 4. There are a variety of circumstances that will test how skilled your crew members are, and it's useful having a high-ranking squad. The gender of your crew will change how shanties are sung on the ship. An all-female crew will sing all-female shanties, while a male crew will do the opposite, and a mixed crew will sound mixed. In the upper right of the ship management window, you'll see resources listed. Morale is the first resource listed, and if it's low, that will result in more fights between crew members and potentially mutiny on the ship. Water and food are both listed, and your crew need both to survive. If your crew doesn't get enough of these resources, they will starve, and morale will drop significantly. Not only can this cause mutinies on your ship, but your crew can flat out die of starvation. Right below resources is the food menu, where you can manually add items. You will gather these resources out in the field constantly, and there's vendors throughout the archipelago who sell food and water. Each option has its own buffs or penalties, so you should be sure to look at them carefully. Your party can eat when you rest, so it's best to save higher tier options for your group and use some of the lower tier options for the ship crew. Note that some basic food and drink can be acquired in large supply, but it will reduce morale every time it is used. That doesn't necessarily mean you should avoid it, but try to keep morale above 80% to limit random negative interactions. The next resource is medicine, and it's used by doctors to heal your crew when they are injured. Even if you don't engage in ship battles, the crew can become injured from text events that occur, so having a skilled doctor and plenty of medicine on hand is preferable. Medical supplies can be looted in the environment or purchased from vendors. Next is ammunition, which is used when firing cannonballs. Most of the time, you'll have to purchase new ammunition, and you'll do this often if you regularly engage in ship battles. The final resource is repair, and is to repair your ship hull after battles or while traveling in the environment. Once again, this resource can be looted or purchased from vendors. Over the course of the game, you'll pick up a variety of dispositions. These are character traits such as being shady, stoic, or aggressive. You can have up to 4 ranks in each disposition based upon responses you have chosen. Higher ranks will cause unique reactions from NPCs that you meet. You also have a reputation with each of your party members that can go up to rank 2. Each character will respond well to different traits, such as Shodi, who really appreciates passion, or Alath, who admires a focus on duty. Higher reputations will unlock more conversations and potentially quests that can be undertaken. You also have a separate reputation with each faction that can go up to rank 5. Positive ranks will provide a discount when purchasing items from faction vendors, while negative ranks will increase how much you have to pay. When you look at the journal, there are skulls to represent the difficulty of certain quests. The more skulls, the more difficult the quest will be. This is also true when you are looking at enemies. Even if you are completely underleveled for a quest, depending on the difficulty you are running and how good your tactics are, you could still potentially complete it. One final note, there are some tools that are repeatedly used to resolve text events in the game. You should always have at least one lockpick, hammer and chisel, pry bar, rope and grappling hook, and torch available in your inventory. There are plenty of situations where having these on hand will make things significantly easier for you. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all the information I have to share regarding Pillars of Eternity 2 Deadfire. I truly hope this guide has been beneficial to you and assists everyone trying to play this game in 2024 and beyond. Next up, we will start a series breaking down all of the classes and probably doing builds for them as well. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and let me know down in the comments. If you have any feedback or differing perspectives, definitely leave those in the comments as well to provide more information for those who plan to play the game. Again, I will add major critiques or corrections into the pinned comments to ensure everyone has the best info possible. Hope all of you enjoyed this video. Take care.